God. Amen. Well, good morning. Yesterday, I was able to have a Zoom call with my grandma because it was her 97th birthday. And she and my grandfather, who he died 3.5 years ago, but they were married for 73 years. And I remember visiting them a couple of years back when grandpa was like 92 and grandma was 90. And at one point, grandma's in the kitchen cleaning something, and my grandpa's sitting on the couch, and he stands up and he says, "I think I'm going to clip my nails." And my grandma says, "I already got the mail." And he was like, "No, nails, Nail." And she goes, "I don't care how you spell it. I already got the mail." And I'm just observing this, reading a book and laughing. And my grandpa looks at his nails, looks at my grandma, shrugs and sits back down and goes, "Maybe tomorrow." And I love that picture of their marriage at that point, they've been married, 70 years or something. And just how much they were in sync and how grandpa just was like, "Let me just sit back down. This isn't worth it." And grandma just cleaning, doing her thing, and just this beauty of this connection. And I've been thinking lately about how we as humans, some of our basic needs are to know and to be known, to belong, to know other people, but also to feel like we are known and that we belong and part of a group, right? And I've been pondering, how do we feel connected in these strange times when it was really good to see grandma, but it was still over Zoom. And as you can tell from the story I just told, her hearing isn't the greatest. And so there was a little bit of a disconnect, but it was still good to see her. But how do we stay connected with other people? And it makes me realize that we as humans have emotional space, and people fill it, and people come and go. Even a simple thing as like getting to know the name of your barista at your favorite coffee shop back when we were able to go to coffee shops. And if you know their name and they know your name, when you walk in and you're like, "Hey, George," or, whatever, and they say, "Hey, Jim," and there's just this little way in which you feel connected. And there's a way in which that barista is now filling up a little space, emotional space in your life. And as we get to know people and spend time with people and have more shared experience, they take up more and more space in our lives. So with my grandma, my grandpa took up most of her emotional space because they've been married and together for so long. And it was just beautiful. But then through random circumstances, sometimes that space that's taken up ends up being taken away. In my case, I'm recently going through a divorce. And so for me, there's a hole in my emotional space that's permanent, because it's a separation and that has ended, right? And now I have to mourn and grieve this permanent disruption in that space. But with my grandma, she also has to mourn and grieve when my grandfather died a few years ago. And now for 73 years, he had taken up emotional space in her life. And she has to figure out how to grieve and mourn and deal with that big hole in her life. And sometimes these holes come in our emotional space if we move away, or, just if circumstances change, you take a new job, all kinds of ways in which we're constantly seeing holes open up, but also holes filled in our emotional space. It also makes me think back in the day when there were pen pals. Remember writing letters and sending them in the actual old mail, and people had pen pals. And I wonder, what would it be like if someone started to develop like an intimate relationship with someone over pen pal, right? Like you're starting to really connect, and you're starting to allow that person to take up emotional space in your life, and you're taking up space in their life. And you're growing more and more connected as pen pals. And I wonder if in the back of your mind at some point you're like, "I have to meet this person because I don't know who they really are." Right? We've been writing letters, we've been getting to know each other, we're kind of having this deep connection, But without really seeing them, I can't know. I don't, this might be someone completely different from how they've presented themselves. This person might be like a serial killer in a prison somewhere. Who knows who this person really, really is until we meet in person. And I get a sense that that's what's going on today with Moses in this passage from Exodus, where Moses has journeyed with God a lot, and they've been together, they've been through a lot, but Moses wants to see God's face. And I wonder if it's that, like, Moses and God have been together, but at the same time, Moses is kind of like, I feel like I don't really know God. I've encountered God in a burning bush. I've encountered God in a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. I've seen God part the Red Sea and we passed through. I've encountered God on the mountaintop in the cloud and the thunder and the lightning and these impressive shows of force. But in the back of my mind, I have not seen God. And I feel like we can relate with Moses, right? There are times when you need this like tangible experience, this tangible thing. I want to hold on to this. I want this picture in my mind. I need to have this experience and this tangible vision of God. And this God is so total, sometimes it's hard to imagine that we can really be in relationship with God. And so Moses wants to see God's face. And we learn a lot about God in the way that God answers, right? Because God says, I can't do that, or it would annihilate you. The totality of God is so much that Moses just physically could not withstand it and would just be destroyed. And I think an analogy to this would be like if a human wanted to get to know an ant, and an ant wanted to get to know a human, maybe like a prisoner who's really bored and has nothing else to do. He gets to know an ant, and maybe he can even see some personality in the ants crawling around. Who knows? But at the end of the day, that ant can never really know the totality of what it means to be human, right? Like, how would you explain to an ant what it means to like ride a bicycle or even drive a car, or crazier yet, to fly in an airplane? These are things that would just blow the ant's mind because he couldn't comprehend what those experiences would even be like. And I feel like that's like us with God. Yes, we are like the ants to God as this epic, total, gigantic being that we can never fully know. And so we get a glimpse of who God is here as Moses just wants this like tangible experience. I have to touch, I want to see God's face. And in the Hebrew language, the way you would say, like, I want to see you, they would say, I want to see your face. That was kind of how they talked about you, like your essence, like, hey, I really want to see you. They would say, I want to see your face. And so here we have Moses desperately wanting to see God. And so God says no, but then gives him this unique experience of putting him in the cave and passing by and showing him his backside. And it's this kind of really interesting tale of how Moses is able to get this glimpse, but just really showing us that God is too big for us to fully comprehend. So what about us? How do we see God? I think it's a great question, especially in these crazy times, but in normal times, it's a great question. And how do we get this tangible experience? How do we touch and feel and kind of know God on a deeper level? And I think it gets back to this emotional space and how we want to know and be known. There's that African word Ubuntu, which I heard someone define as the divine in me recognizes and sees the divine in you. And it's a way of saying that we're all created in the image of God and we all carry a bit of God with us. And so when we see another human being, when we interact with another human being, if we have eyes to see, we can see God in that person. But I think it takes training and intentionality, because sometimes when we see other human beings, it's while driving a car and they are honking their horn and giving us a certain hand gesture. And in that moment, you want to honk back and give a hand gesture back. And in that moment of anger, frustration, it's very difficult to see the divine in that person, right? In fact, we're doing the opposite. We're denying the divine in them, and we're just venting our anger and frustration. And so I think it takes intentionality to see that divinity in the other, to recognize that God is present. And if I want to see God, I need to get to know the people that are taking up space in my emotional being. One way that I tried to do this recently is that when I walked to the grocery store up 29th Street, heading towards Broadway, and you start to go up this hill right before you get to the school and the parking lot that we've parked at back when we could gather. Right before that, there's a building that's not being used. And at the on the side of the building next to the door, there's a man that lives there. He's homeless and he's living on the side of that building. And every time I walk by, I know he's going to be there. At least his stuff is going to be there. A reminder that a human being lives on a sidewalk in Oakland. And I walked by him one day and I'm wearing my mask, and he was sitting near the sidewalk I was walking on and praying, prayerfully, wanting to see God in this man. I kind of waved and I said, "Good morning." And he was mumbling to himself. I think he struggles with mental health issues. And as he's mumbling, he looks at me he doesn't have a mask on, and he kind of shakes his fist. Not in any kind of menacing way, but just as some kind of gesture as he keeps mumbling. And I just kept walking. And at first I was disappointed that I didn't get a greeting in return, right? I was trying to be like, "Hey, I see the divine in you," and I'm saying good morning, and you're shaking your fist at me. But then I just keep wanting to see the divinity in that man. And I just see how much we as a community, a city, a county, a state, and a nation have failed him. We, the structures that we live under, do not recognize the divinity of this man. And so we allow this Black man with mental health issues to live on a sidewalk when, if you look around, there are resources aplenty. And if we had the political will, we could see the divine in him and treat him with dignity and respect that he deserves, because he is human and there is divine in him. And so as I kept walking, I realized I need to create space in my emotional being. I need emotional space. I need to allow this man who I can't really have a conversation with and who I can't really get to know, but I want to pray for him every week. And I've begun praying for him every week because he needs to take up some space in my life, because I need to see the divinity in him. And therefore, I'm also seeing the divine and the divinity in myself. And so I pray this morning that we will have eyes to see God, that we will be intentional and have the training so that we can see Jesus in each and every person that we encounter and get some small glimpse, like Moses in the cleft of the rock, getting a glimpse of God. May we be able to get glimpses of God every moment of every day. Amen.
Amen.